Hi there, Mr. Speaker, members. We're having a conversation about preemption and not preemption, but essentially what Representative Craddock is doing is he's saying that basically the ordinances that have come up by 40 or so cities should trump the ordinances that are in effect right now in 1,100 different cities. And as you go and you look through these ordinances that have been created, you discover a few different things. First of all, that they're not enforced. Okay, these are ordinances that have been created, and but for a couple of occasions, cities have not even bothered to make those enforcements. But when they have, take for instance here in Austin, as I was mentioning before, the ordinances were literally thrown out. They said that the state actually had the authority to make those kind of decisions. When we talk about finance, when we talk about commerce, when I look at this, what I want to be able to say is, hey, when it has gone to a court, these ordinances have been thrown out. So what my amendment does, quite frankly, is it flips it around, and rather than say it preempts, it says it does not preempt. So with that, I'd just like to...
Mr. Speaker,
Representative Burris, for what purpose?
would the gentleman yield for some questions?
Absolutely.
He yields.
Okay, so the body is clear. This was a bill you actually filed in the IFS committee, isn't that right?
That's right. So I do have another amendment that, if successful here, I will also file.
Okay.
But essentially, yes, what I'm trying to do is get to the point where we can allow the state to provide the proper amount of regulation on this.
But so the body is clear on this. I mean, this amendment, as if it was amended, would essentially be your bill filed in the IFS committee that we voted out on not straight partisan lines. Isn't that right?
That's right. It did come out of the Investment and Financial Services Committee. And again, I think what it shows is that from a bipartisan perspective, people want less regulation, not more, that they want the state to be able to decide.
If I recall correctly, some of the testimony we heard was the Texas Constitution was clear that this is a state thing, that we're in charge of regulating what is going to be interest, and that's where this is supposed to be.
That's right.
And in fact,
this is the state's purview, absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, even the advocates who wanted the city ordinances to be adopted recognize that, at the end of the day, this really does belong at the state. That seemed to be all of the testimony, is the state needs to be the one making these decisions, not municipalities.
You're right, and I would add to that, you're absolutely right, Representative Burris, but what I add to that is what we have done, we the citizens of Texas, we have ceded our authority to decide what rules and ordinances we want, not just on capital access businesses, but on ATMs, on everything else, and we've ceded that authority to a federal bureaucracy.
Because let's be clear, this wasn't just payday lenders who were for this was also your banks, your community banks were worried that municipalities were going to begin charging a fee on ATMs to basically regulate money. So your bill was supported by our community bankers as well as payday lenders and other cab businesses.
That's right. And again, this has, in the way that I look at it, this is about finance, okay? And it has nothing to do about a specific type of financial product, although I'm happy, of course, to talk about a specific one. But we heard cases of where extra ATM fees, okay, going to an ATM. What we heard in that committee, if you Representative Burrows remember, and I'm sure you do, what one of the witnesses had testified was, the question was, well, what happens if the person can't get access to that stuff? And he said, well, they can get in a car and they can go and get some more money somewhere else. And I just thought that was so disingenuous on the part of that person to say that here's a person who maybe is low income, who has needs, has a need for capital, and the response was go in a car and go somewhere else.
Well, if I remember, the people who testified very much in favor of these municipal ordinances, I tried to find out in, inquiring, I said, how do you define success? Have they been successful? And there was no good measure they provided us. And the best they came up with is they said, well, there's fewer of these businesses, they're closing their doors. So the way they defined success to us in the committee was, we're putting businesses out of business, and that's successful. It wasn't about the person who wanted the loan. Right. It wasn't about their quality of life. It was about shutting the doors on these businesses is what they wanted to do.
That's exactly right. One, you're absolutely right. What they said was that they had no data. But if there was some data, they would be, it would obviously be in their favor, which was not true. But you're exactly right. Their metric in terms of success was unemployment numbers. Their metric in success was closures.
Yeah, and Representative, if I remember also correctly, while we're talking about it, I mean, interest in all of this, the uniform code that defines this went into place in 1960 from Governor Connolly, and he wanted to have a standardization and put this at the state level, and that pretty much has been the case since 2013 until this came on board. And recently, 2 courts here in Austin have struck down those ordinances, if I'm not mistaken, because they said, no, this really is at the state's level. So all your amendment would do is do what these courts and what Connolly set out to do.
You're right, and again, and the reason I bring up, and you bring up again, those 2 rulings on ordinances is those are the only 2 that have come up in 6 years. Given how much time and effort has been put into this, that only 2 ordinances even have gone all the way to court. And so now that they've gone to court for a municipal court in Austin to rule negatively against an Austin ordinance, to me shows that.
So just so the body's clear, if I'm not mistaken, all your amendment will do is basically codify how we operated since 1960 to probably 2013 and put the power at the state level where it was intended to be and where it had belonged until, I guess, somebody had these good ideas to go around and try to put these businesses under.
Mm-hmm. We're just, and what I really hope, Representative Burrows, is that Representative Craddick would pull down his amendment and we can work on the rest of this bill. While you and I have had this conversation in our hearing and others have had this in our hearings, I don't think this is a proper time nor place to have such a long conversation that just opens this up to a lot of things. Representative Kemple, Chairman Kemple, he's worked on this bill for a long time. This is one of those cases where someone tries to go and put their other bill on it as well. So again, I would just ask that Representative Craddick pull down his amendment and we continue on with our day.
I'll tell you what, if we go forward, I'm going to vote for your amendment to the amendment. I think that's the right policy for the state. And if we're going to have this debate today on this bill where cabs really weren't affected, let's go ahead and have the full debate, and we'll do what the IFS committee did. At least I will vote like I did in the IFS committee to make this go at the state level rather than let the cities come up with their own finance codes and do something potentially even to our community banks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
You're right.
Representative Bernal, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield?
Do you want to pull it down? I'll pull mine down.
Do you yield?
Yield.
He yields.
Parliamentary inquiry, how much time is left?
2.5 minutes.
All right. Representative, are you aware that San Antonio has one of these ordinances?
If I had to guess, if San Antonio is one of the 42 cities, I would have.
I'll represent to you that they do, and that
okay.
and did you know that I was the sponsor of that ordinance?
I did not know that.
Okay. Well, now you know.
So I'll take it you're not going to vote for my amendment to the amendment.
Are you aware that once the ordinance was implemented, that there was not an uptick in crime, or as Representative Stickland mentioned, gang membership or activity?
What would you say, based on scientific or economic or other data, would you say was discovered? I don't know, when did that ordinance come into place?
5 years ago.
Okay, so in the past 5 years, what data, research data do you have that shows the access of data from individuals?
I'll answer the question, then I'll resume asking the questions. But the answer to the question is that the number of defaults. The number of defaults. Because what this really is, do you believe in the other consumer? Do you believe in the value?
I'm sorry. I mean, but you said the number of defaults. Obviously, if less people are able to get access, so are you talking about a lower default rate?
Both.
Okay, but if what you're doing is you're restricting the access to capital only to those individuals who have better,
That is volume. I'm talking about percentages. The percentages have dropped as well. So volume, sure. Percentage dropped as well. All right. So
percentage default.
The percentages dropped as well.
But if you look at it as a risk pool,
I'm going to ask a question.
I thought you were asking me a question.
And the question is, do you disagree with the other consumer protection laws that this body has passed?
I do not disagree with every single consumer protection
And so would you agree that...
But I don't think, if you can, I don't think this is really...
You don't believe this is a consumer protection law?
I think telling people that they can't get access to money, that they can either guarantee or what have you. Listen, I have been definitely on the side of saying that we should find ways for people to be able to
This is a consumer protection provision.
Representative Hefner raises point of order. The gentleman's time expired. The point of order is well taken and sustained.